What is the most dangerous mutant power of Wolverine? Is it the claws or the adamantium skeleton? Or the animal instincts buried underneath his skin? Well, I think it is the Berserker rage that keeps the animal alive within him, mostly during times of crisis. In the world of X-Men, Wolverine is known to be the killing machine everyone coveted, and that's why they did a lot of lethal experiments on him that could have wiped out a normal human's existence. But James Logan Howlett, the natural-born Wolverine, is like an indestructible force of nature that just doesn't get tired. Wolverine's Berserker rage amplifies his strength, making him even stronger and more ferocious than he naturally is. So in today's video, I'm going to take a deep dive into this specific trait to understand how this feral rage affects his physical structure and his biological functioning. Hang tight with me till the end of this video, and let's get started. What is really happening inside his body when the rage takes over? The Berserker rage seems like an emotional outburst, but if you dissect this step by step, anatomically, you'll find his body is weirdly connected with this phenomenon. First, we're going to take a look at the neurochemical overload in his system. The outburst of this rage basically happens when severe mental and physical trauma triggers it. The adrenal glands release a flood of adrenaline and noradrenaline into his bloodstream, which also increases his heart rate, thereby directing highly oxygenated blood to his muscles. But the main problem is that this high amount of hormonal rush shuts down his prefrontal cortex, which means his brain can no longer think consciously or make any moral decisions. His muscles do not obey the safety limits, gaining unnatural strength during this state. Now, this kind of rage would give a normal human a major heart attack or a brain stroke or something, but for Wolverine, the dude doesn't even feel anything at all except for the immense urge for violence. When adrenaline fills his blood with natural opiates, it suppresses his pain sensation, so what happens is that he can feel the bullets piercing his skin, or a sharp and blunt trauma hurting his skin, but it doesn't give him agonizing pain. Moreover, his animal senses activate, giving him a super heightened sense of smell for pheromones and blood, and the ability to hear heartbeats from miles away. He literally becomes a feral creature, like the most violent apex predators in the wild. But here is the irony, or you may call it a paradox in Wolverine's nature. This guy literally becomes a predator, but even during this state he fights with precision. It's his muscle memory that helps him remember the years of martial arts and military training that he has been through. His healing factor is a big contributor in this part because without his healing powers, this kind of berserker state would have killed Logan in a few seconds. So, when the rage is triggered, his muscles contract, but his healing factor constantly regenerates his cells and tissues, fixing all the broken parts of his system. The rage drains a lot of his physical energy too, creating lactic acid in his body, which could give him physical fatigue, but thanks to his healing factors, it breaks down the lactic acid and reduces any kind of fatigue or tiring sensation in his body. Even the highly energized brain doesn't get a stroke only because of the healing factor constantly repairing the neural tissues, keeping it functional. The most vivid presentation of his berserker state is found in the 2017 movie Logan, where an aging Wolverine gets violently mad while fighting the Reavers, led by Donald Pierce. Though it was the last few moments before he took his final breath in the movie, it was one of the best cinematic explorations of his berserker rage. Where does this animal fury actually come from? The Berserker rage is just a part and parcel of his mutant powers, but we should also remember that Wolverine was once turned into a living weapon, as well as an experimental subject that scientists loved to mess with. And that's why it's not just the mutant powers that developed this rage in him. It also got worse due to the severe trauma he went through during the Weapon X program. Now, if we first look at the organic mutant powers, half of the query is resolved. Wolverine, born as James Howlett in the 19th century, first felt his powers manifesting when Thomas Logan killed his father. Now that's a long story that we're not going to discuss here, and I hope most of you know that, but the baseline is that this was the first time when he felt this rage. The trauma of losing a loved one made his bone claws pop out of his knuckles, leaving just a realization that he ain't a normal child. He was born with these mutant powers which could turn him into a predatory animal at any moment of his life. But it also meant that he could gain all those senses that a predatory animal has. A normal human has a fight or flight response whenever they face peril, but due to his mutant powers, Logan didn't know what flight was. He was born to fight with an extremely overwhelming rage that gave him an uncanny primal look. Now let's talk about the Weapon X program, which changed his body and mind forever. So, under the supervision of three masterminds, Dr. Abraham Cornelius, Professor Thornton, and Carol Hines, the Weapon X program was about keeping an unconscious Logan inside a containment tank and injecting true liquid adamantium into his skeleton to make him an indestructible living weapon. Now, the adamantium could have poisoned his body, killing him instantly, but Wolverine lived only because of his healing factors that ran overtime to eliminate the metal toxicity from his body. The scientists also used memory implants to erase his memories, and that's why Wolverine totally forgot that he once had bone claws as his original mutant gifts. Now, with the memory totally wiped, Wolverine was easier to control, so the scientists used him as a test subject, constantly putting him in perilous situations to check if he could really live up to being a bioweapon. As scientists controlled and manipulated his cognition, they treated the rage like an on and off switch, which was so inhuman that it already made a void inside Wolverine's mind. He was gradually getting feral day by day until one day he slaughtered some associates of Cornelius and ran away. So yeah, Weapon X didn't give birth to the Berserker rage, but it surely made his life a living hell. Not being able to remember anything about his past, Wolverine's growing confusion made him the most short-tempered and crankiest mutant in the X-Men series. When did we actually see it for the first time in the comics, and how did it grow from there? The first time we ever saw Wolverine's wild rage was in the 1974 publication of The Incredible Hulk, issue number 180 through 181, where Logan held nothing back and went totally feral on Hulk and Wendigo. But then it was only shown to be a violent rage of an angry mutant on the battlefield until later Claremont officially confirmed this to be his most unique mutant trait. The Berserker rage was first formally mentioned and visually presented in the 1975 published comic Uncanny X-Men issue number 96. So the issue kick-started with Cyclops mourning the death of Thunderbird and feeling guilty of not being able to help him out of the explosion. So, out of anger and grief, a disturbed Cyclops unleashed his optic blast that accidentally destroyed an ancient stone cairn on Xavier's estate, freeing an ancient dragon-like creature called Kurok the Damned, who leaped into this universe to kill humans. Kurok and his kind used to rule the earth, and now after being freed of his curse, he wanted to gain that power once again. So, on a normal evening in X Mansion, Kurok appeared as the uninvited guest, unleashing total chaos inside. One by one, everyone tried to fight him, but Kurok was too strong to be taken down. So Wolverine stepped in. This is the first time we have seen his Berserker rage take over as he maims the creature with his metallic claws. But despite the great fight establishing Wolverine's unique quality, it didn't really kill Kurok. So Storm had to venture out to collapse the cairn and seal the portal to stop the monster from getting into their territory. During these early appearances, especially during the Claremont era, we didn't really see the origin or the psychological explanation of this rage. But then in the 1982 4-issue Wolverine series, Claremont and Frank Miller gave a samurai philosophy as an important backstory of Logan. They showed how his Berserker rage actually came from his tragic past, and how he mastered this unique ability with practice, discipline, and the Japanese art of Bushido. However, in the modern era comics like Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X or in Origin by Paul Jenkins, this Berserker phenomenon has been deconstructed and analyzed. The writers realized that this rage was even more enhanced because of the Weapon X program giving him the traumatic memories as an inseparable part of his life. What happens to his body when the adamantium disappears? After losing all his memories, the adamantium bonded with his skeleton became a part of his existence. Now, no one, including Wolverine himself, could ever believe that his body could function without this metallic grafting. So when, in the Fatal Attractions arc, Magneto stripped the metal off his skeleton, it gave him the most agonizing experience he ever had in his life. In X-Men Volume 2, issue number 25, written by Fabian Nicieza, and illustrated by Andy Kubert and Matt Ryan, Magneto was barred from Earth with the help of an artificial mesh created from an electromagnetic field shielding the planet. Magneto, enraged, decided to cut it with a swath, which made a huge blast on Earth, doing damage that alerted the X-Men. Professor X even wore a Shi'ar technology armor suit to get ready for a face-off with Magnus. Wolverine was in the team, unaware of the aftermath this confrontation would leave on him. In space, when the X-Men infiltrated Avalon, Magneto appeared to face his frenemies. But Wolverine made a mistake by attacking him on his own, and fell into the most painful trap created by Magnus. He didn't even get a chance to scream or counterattack Magneto, who had total control over his adamantium skeleton on a molecular level. And then he just ripped the metal off his body, which came out like an eruption of water. The liquid adamantium oozed out of his body through his pores and his open wounds. His whole body looked different, and it was just falling apart. So Jean Grey stepped in to hold the hands of the man she had loved. We see Wolverine on the brink of his death, as if adamantium were an organic part of his body, the only life force snatched away from him. So, knowing the possibility that Logan could still make it without this metal, Professor X and Jean Grey try to save him from this torment. Magneto was already defeated, as Xavier had telepathically put him in a catatonic state. Now, after destroying the space station Avalon, the X-Men were returning aboard Blackbird, where Wolvie was kept restrained on a metatable, while Professor and Jean together created a psi-link to enter his mind to keep it stable and prevent it from collapsing. Well, inside the mind, it was a whole mayhem of memories, and all of them were traumatic, like the memories of Weapon X and several experiments that were constantly being played out in a surreal realm. Even Wolverine himself walked there as a fragment of his mind. As Jean didn't want to intrude on his private memory, she decided to leave his mind and convince Professor X to do so. Meanwhile, as Blackbird suffered a heavy storm while it was trying to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, the X-Men in the spaceship were getting sucked into the heavy storm, including Jean, who just managed to grab onto a door. But at this moment, a dying Wolverine suddenly got up and pulled her back to safety. It was astonishing for sure, but before this happened, Xavier had entered his mind, where he once again watched those memories relived by Wolverine. However, Wolverine himself was experiencing several hallucinations, as sometimes he was trying to reach death but failed to do so. Finally, when he saw a hand in the air trying to reach out to him, he recognized it as Jean's and he grabbed it to save her. Slowly recovering from his physical trauma, Wolverine was still not over with what Magneto did to him. But despite a lot of things confusing him, he continued to examine his own strength to prove that he's still a competent mutant member of the X-Men. So during one such training period in Danger Room, Professor X tried to test the man by constantly hitting him with the help of his battle droids. After it pushed him too far, Wolverine's Berserker rage returned and revealed his truest and rawest mutant powers. His bone claws protruded from his knuckles, making them bleed profusely. Both Wolverine and his X-Men learned that adamantium was just a biotechnical grafting on his naturally powerful skeleton. So yes, the adamantium incident by Magneto was indeed a painful one, as it totally distorted Wolverine's body internally. But his natural bone claws and healing factors, coupled with his indomitable will, brought him back to life once again. Does using the rage too often permanently change him? Yes, the rage changed him physically, but not permanently, since he came back to his original shape again. It happened after Magneto ripped the metal off his body, giving him this constant agony of losing a vital element that kept him strong and confident. In Wolverine number 100, Genesis had captured Wolverine to reinstall the adamantium into his skeleton, to turn him into Death, the Horseman of Apocalypse. But this time, Logan was conscious of what was being done to him, and who was operating all this. So, his brain and healing factor were functioning to reject the adamantium bonding in his skin, and that totally changed Wolverine, turning him into a creature that we had never seen before. Meanwhile, Zoe Culloden and Cannonball were inside the Citadel of Genesis, where they found millions of Egyptians held captive in sarcophagi, from which their life forces were being extracted from their body to be used in the resurrection of Apocalypse. Now, as Cannonball launched an attack and kick-started a chaotic battle with the Dark Riders of Genesis, one of the equipment broke the containment tank, releasing the beast into the world. By the time Wolverine's body had totally rejected the adamantium bonding, which had transformed him into an animalistic version of himself with no properly developed human nose. Now, a transformed and ferocious Logan attacked the Dark Riders when Genesis captured Cannonball and brought him into the creche of Apocalypse. But Logan pounced upon Genesis and brutally mauled him to death. Before leaving, Logan asked Cannonball to deliver his apology to Cable for killing his son. Now, this is one of the physical transformations that was worth mentioning, but what about the mental changes? Does this Berserker rage morally blind Wolverine? Well, that depends on whether he is being controlled by an evil being. So what we saw in the Old Man Logan storyline was devastating as well as very eye-opening for us. We first learned that the rage could be as much a gift as it was a curse for him. In this story, Mysterio had set up the trap by totally controlling Logan's mind, giving him an illusion that his main enemies were none other than the X-Men. So an enraged Logan killed all the X-Men in an unrestrained fury. But when his senses returned and he found out that he had killed his friends and colleagues, the guilt and grief left him shaken to the core. He was so mortified by this feeling of guilt that he decided not to use his claws anymore. So as you can see, there are two different extensions of this primal ability, and honestly both of them can be a dangerous turn for Wolverine in the long run. What powers does the Rage physically unlock? Wolverine is naturally one of the mutants with raw and brute powers, but his strength is elevated when the Berserker Rage takes over. Any kind of limit that his normal and rational mind would follow will disappear the moment this rage is activated. For example, as I said before, the rage alters his biological mechanism, causing visible changes in his appearance. During this state, Logan doesn't feel any pain, despite his bones breaking, skin burning, or having internal injuries. He still keeps fighting without paying attention to the pain in his body. The healing factor runs into overdrive, and the constant cellular regeneration reduces any kind of exhaustion from his system, making him even stronger and faster than his normal state. And then also the heightened senses of smell and hearing ability. But hold on, with the increasing power of pain tolerance, it also reduces his rational thinking. If the physical strength reaches the top level, it also decreases his self-control. As the healing process speeds up to sharpen his primal senses, his moral judgment declines and he fails to choose his targets. Turning into a completely feral mode, he loses his tactical judgment, which puts everyone around him in trouble regardless of who his enemies and friends are. In the 2016 X-Men Apocalypse movie, Logan appeared in a cameo role only to show how mercilessly he can kill whoever he finds next to him during this stage. When Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler sneak inside Stryker's Weapon X facility at Alkali Lake, they find a brainwashed Logan in his most feral state. But as he's set loose, he kills almost every security soldier and guard in the vicinity, and is about to attack the X-Men as well, until some leftover memories inside his mind let him recognize Jean Grey. He lets Jean touch him, so she telepathically helps him to remember at least some fragments of his past that stabilize his mind. But not being able to recognize all four of them, he leaves the facility center, disappearing into the woods. What are the visual and design cues artists use to show it? For decades, we've been reading Wolverine comics and watching Hugh Jackman portray him so flawlessly on screen. But we're still not over this character and his lore. Why? Well, the main credit goes to the legends like Len Wein, John Romita Sr., and Herb Trimpe, who actually designed the character in the comics. Later, many pencilers, painters, and illustrators have given him specific designs and made his feral nature come alive on the pages of a comic book, like Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum, who designed the Berserker Rage for the first time, visually telling us why we can call Logan a Wolverine. The visual changes are very interesting to follow. Normally, Logan would stand straight, but when the rage takes over, his posture changes as he lowers himself and leans forward like an animal preparing to attack. The scariest transformation happens to his eyes, which go ferociously white or black, or sometimes shadowed to make him look like a bloodthirsty wolf about to maul its prey. His famous spiky hairstyle, which gives the illusion of horns popping out of his head, gets wilder and more feral in the Berserker state. His sharp, shiny metallic claws are no longer so polished when he enters this stage, as comics would often show his claws covered with blood, while a roaring scream comes out of his mouth. However, in the cinematic adaptations, it is not always possible to achieve the comic-accurate look of Wolverine, but the Berserker state still looks very close to the comic presentations. Another Berserker fight we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine was when their Honda Odyssey fight erupts after Logan realizes Wade lied about knowing whether the TVA could repair his world. The argument becomes deeply personal. Wade finally punches him, and Logan explodes into rage. The two had a fight where a feral Wolverine crouched forward, running like an angry wolf right towards Deadpool to finish him off. But the fight continued for a long time since both of them were blessed with supernatural healing factors, which would never let them bleed to death. Now, it is true that Logan is never really a jolly guy, like a guy who'd wave at you with a warm smile on his face. But these visual cues can help you recognize his feral mood, so if you ever spot these changes in Wolverine on screen, just know that things are about to get really messy. What details around the rage are still debated or shaky canon? Now this is where things get really interesting, because now I'm about to explain some of the shaky beliefs and disputed ideas about Wolverine's origin and power. First of all, the debunked mutated Wolverine story, where it is suggested that Logan was actually originally a Wolverine who was transformed into a human by the High Evolutionary. This idea existed during some early Marvel discussions, but it never became an official canon. Wolverine was always a human mutant who was born with his powers, which first manifested in his youth. The next theory is about his control over the Berserker rage, and it really confuses me as to how this uncontrollable rage ultimately gets controlled by this man. Well, to answer that question, we have evidence of his years of practice, disciplined lifestyle, and training to control his powers. But in some contexts, it gets utterly disturbing to see that Logan is consciously summoning the rage to use it like a weapon against his enemies. One of the finest examples of this can be seen in the 2011 anime series of X-Men, where in Season 1, Episode 11, Wolverine and Beast were trapped by a villain named Neuron. To beat his ass, Logan asks Beast to punch him until his rage activates. Beast is already afraid of Logan's rage, so he initially holds back. But as he insists upon punching him hard, Beast obeys and finally triggers his violent state. Logan brutally takes down Neuron and turns to Beast, who literally sees his death approaching in the form of Wolverine. But it turns out that Logan is only messing with him. Now, this came as a relief that Logan didn't attack Beast in a fit of rage, but it also makes me wonder how he could calm himself down after the rage took over. This incident only proves that Wolverine has tremendous control over himself. Otherwise, such primal rage could have forced him to unleash a bloody massacre. However, it is only in some cinematic adaptations, like the 2017 movie Logan, that the after effect of his rage was vividly depicted on screen. The violence and too much blood cannot be explored in every iteration. For example, in X-Men 97, Logan's rage disturbed him internally, making him growl in anger like a predator. But the show never really showcased his brutal massacre mode for censorship issues. So yeah, it is true that different iterations and different writers have shown his rage in different ways. During his comic run, many new comic writers and artists joined the production and gave him unique details that did not always stay consistent with the official lore. But let's not delve deep into the debunked fan theories or alternative reality lores to explain the Berserker rage. Rather, revisit the iconic comics to know more and see how Wolverine's personality is defined by the most primal form of his anger. And that's it, guys. These are all the details that you need to keep in mind while you think about Wolverine's Berserker rage. And always remember that it is not just an angry outburst, but a real phenomenon, officially described as one of his raw mutant powers. On that note, this video is over. If you like this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on Wolverine's rage. Until then, goodbye and see you in the next one.